The first time I met him, I was elbow deep in a dead man's filing cabinet, and he was pointing a gun at my head. I should back up. I work in forensic document authentication. Not the glamorous kind you see in movies, where people hold paper up to light and declare it a forgery in 30 seconds. The real kind. The kind where you spend 14 hours comparing ink oxidation rates under a microscope and write a 40-page report that 3 lawyers will argue about for 6 months. I work out of a converted loft in the annex neighborhood of Toronto. Just me and 2 junior analysts. And a humidity-controlled storage room that costs more to maintain than my apartment. My name is on a small brass plate by the door. I have a master's degree from U of T and a reputation that took 12 years to build. I am not the kind of person things happen to. That's what I always thought. Anyway, it was a Tuesday in February when my phone rang at 11:15 at night. I was still at the office. I usually am, which my mother has pointed out, is not a personality trait to be proud of. Going through a disputed estate document for a case out of Oakville. The call came from a number I didn't recognize, a 416 area code. I almost let it go to voicemail. Mims. Vance? The voice was low and precise, a man's voice, but not aggressive. Careful. The kind of careful that means someone has thought very hard about exactly how they want to sound. Speaking. My name isn't important right now. What is important is that I have a document I need authenticated by 9 tomorrow morning. I'm prepared to pay your standard rate plus 50%. I leaned back in my chair. My standard rate for rush work is double, and I don't take new clients without a referral. A pause. You were referred by Arthur Mendez. Arthur was a notary I'd worked with for years, semi-retired, deeply trustworthy. I had no reason to doubt the name, and every reason to be cautious anyway. Have Mr. Mendez call me directly, I said. I'll be in the office until midnight. Another pause, longer this time. That may be difficult. Mr. Mendez is currently unavailable. I found out later what that meant. Arthur had been found that evening in his office on Bay Street with a single gunshot wound to the chest. He was alive, barely, and in surgery at Toronto General. I didn't know any of that when I hung up the phone, made a note in my contact log the way I always do, and went back to the Oakville documents. The man called back at midnight exactly. This time he told me his name. I won't use it here. Even now, writing this out, I find myself instinctively cautious, so I'll call him what I eventually came to call him in my own head, the client. He told me Arthur had been hurt. He told me it wasn't safe for him to explain more over the phone. He told me he needed to meet in person. Excuse me, and that he understood this was an unusual request, and that he would explain everything when we met, and that the document I needed to authenticate was the only thing standing between him and losing something he could not afford to lose. I said no. He said, Mims, Vance, someone already broke into your office tonight. They didn't find what they were looking for, because it isn't there. But they'll be back. I looked around my office. Everything looked exactly as I'd left it. Everything looked exactly as I'd left it. That was the problem. I got up and checked the storage room. The humidity reader on the door showed a gap of 4 minutes, 2 hours ago, where it had been opened and reclosed. I keep a log. I checked it. The last authorized entry was me, at 6:17. Someone had been in my storage room at 9:49 p.m., while I was sitting 20 feet away. I called the number back. Tell me where to meet you, I said. He sent a car, not a taxi, not a rideshare, a black Suburban with tinted windows and a driver who didn't speak and didn't make eye contact. I know how that sounds. I know exactly how that sounds. And I want to be clear that I am a grown woman with a functioning brain and a self-preservation instinct, and I still got in that car, because the alternative was waiting alone in an office that a stranger had already broken into once that night. We drove to the distillery district. The cobblestoned streets were empty. At that hour, the boutiques and restaurants shuttered and dark, snow coming down in that particular Toronto, way that makes the city look like a snow globe, someone left in a corner and forgot. The driver stopped in front of a building I recognized, a converted distillery warehouse, now a private event space. A woman was waiting at the side entrance. She was around 40, compact and efficient looking, with her dark hair pulled back and an earpiece in her left ear. "Ms. Vance," she said, "thank you for coming." She led me through a service corridor and up a freight elevator. to what I can only describe as a temporary command center. A long table covered in laptops. 4 men who didn't introduce themselves. And at the far end of the room, standing with his back to me, and his hands clasped behind him, looking out a window that faced the canal, the client. He was taller than I expected, broad-shouldered in a way that looked native rather than manufactured, like someone who'd spent his youth outdoors rather than in a gym. When he turned, I cataloged him the way I catalog everything. Mid-40s, dark hair with gray at the temples, a face that had probably been handsome 10 years ago, and had become something more useful since. Not handsome anymore. Serious. The kind of serious that comes from a very long time of having to be. Miss Vance. He crossed the room and offered his hand. His grip was measured. He'd thought about that too. I apologize for the circumstances. What happened to Arthur? I said. I didn't shake his hand for longer than necessary. Something moved behind his eyes. He's in surgery. The prognosis is good. He was targeted because he vouched for me, and someone found out. Who targeted him? That's what I'm trying to determine. He gestured toward the table. Please, sit. I didn't sit. I stood with my coat still on and my bag over my shoulder, because sitting down felt like a decision I wasn't ready to make yet. You said you have a document. I do. He nodded to the woman with the earpiece. I would later learn she handled his operations logistics, so I came to think of her simply as his coordinator, and she produced a flat document case, the acid-free kind I use myself. She set it on the table and stepped back. I did sit down then, because the document called to me the way documents always do. I have never been able to explain this to people who don't have it. There is something about old paper, about the specific combination of age and intention and human hand, that I find almost unbearably interesting, even under these circumstances. Even here, I opened the case. Inside was a land title document, Ontario Registry, dated 1947. The kind of thing that should have been in a provincial archive or a law firm's vault, not in an acid-free case in a converted distillery building at 1 a.m. This is a title document for a parcel of land in the Muskoka region, I said, because stating the obvious is how I organize my thinking. What's being disputed? Whether it's real, he said. I looked up. Whether it's authentic, you mean? I mean whether it's real, he repeated. I know it's authentic. I watched my grandfather sign it. The question is whether the copy currently held by a law firm on King Street is real, or whether it was substituted at some point in the last 10 years. I looked back at the document. Then I reached into my bag and got out my loupe. I always have my loupe. It is the one completely reliable thing in my life. I'm going to need better light, I said. For the next 3 hours, I worked. The coordinator brought me coffee without being asked. Black, no sugar, which I hadn't specified, which meant someone had done their research on me before tonight. The client sat nearby, but not close. Close enough to answer questions, far enough not to hover. He was the first person who had ever watched me work without making me feel watched. I don't know how he managed that. I think it was the same quality that made his voice precise on the phone. An extremely disciplined awareness of exactly how much space he was taking up. I found what I was looking for at 2:47 in the morning. The document in front of me was genuine. The ink composition, the paper fiber dating, the notarial stamp, all of it consistent with 1947, all of it correct. But there was a second signature on the back, a witness signature that was wrong. Not wrong in a way that a lawyer would catch. Wrong in a way that I caught, because the iron gall ink used in that signature had a slightly different oxidation pattern than the rest of the document, and the pressure profile of the pen strokes was inconsistent with the primary hand, and the paper at that specific corner had been exposed to a chemical solvent that accelerated the aging process. Someone had added that witness signature later, maybe 20 years later, maybe more recently than that. The document is authentic, I said, straightening up. The primary text, the primary signatures, the stamp, all genuine 1947. But there's a secondary witness signature on the reverse that was added, after the fact. I can't tell you exactly when without lab analysis, but I can tell you it was done deliberately to alter the legal interpretation of the transfer. He was very still when I said that. The kind of stillness that isn't absence of feeling, the kind that is controlled presence of it. That signature, he said quietly, is how a law firm on King Street is currently arguing that the land transfer included a reversionary clause, meaning the property reverted to the other party's estate when my grandfather died. And without the clause, without it, the land has been in my family for 77 years, and the development rights are worth approximately $40 million. I sat with that for a moment. $40 million is a number I understand abstractly but not practically. My condo cost $420, and I'd thought that was an alarming amount of money. Who else knows about this? At the moment? You and me and the people in this room. He paused. And whoever broke into your office tonight. I had not forgotten about that. Why was someone in my storage room? Because word got out that Arthur had recommended you, and because someone is very motivated to ensure this document never gets properly analyzed. He looked at me steadily. Ms. Vance, I need to ask you something, and I want to be transparent about what I'm asking. I need you to testify to what you've found. In court. Under oath. And I need you to understand that the people on the other side of this are not operating entirely within legal boundaries. It was the most careful understatement I had ever heard in person. What does that mean, exactly? I said. It means they've been in Arthur's office. It means they've been in yours. He paused again. It means you are safer here tonight than alone. I thought about my storage room. I thought about the 4-minute gap in the humidity log. I'd like to call my sister, I said. He nodded immediately. Of course. My sister is 6 years younger than me and lives in Canada with her husband and their 2 kids, and a very energetic golden retriever. She has absolutely nothing to do with any of this. I called her because she is the person I call when I am not sure what to do, and also because leaving a message with someone who knows where I am seemed prudent. She picked up on the second ring, groggy and alarmed, because it was 3 a.m. I'm fine, I said, before she could panic. I'm working a job. I just wanted someone to know I'm in the distillery district. Why are you in the distillery district at 3 a.m? Unusual client. Silence. Then, is he cute? Absolutely not the point. That means yes. I hung up. The coordinator across the room was very carefully not smiling. I stayed. I worked through the rest of the night, doing preliminary analysis, and starting to document my findings. The client arranged for me to have access to the equipment I needed. Some of it from his people, some of it retrieved from my office by the coordinator, and 2 of the quiet men, who returned at 4 a.m. with my portable spectrometer and my reference library. And, improbably, the jar of peanut butter I keep in my desk drawer for late nights. He noticed me looking at the peanut butter. Your assistant told them it was essential, he said. My assistant is 24 and thinks everything is essential, I said. She said, and I'm quoting, Megan does not function after 3 a.m. without peanut butter. Please don't bring her back without it. I made a note to give my assistant a raise. By 6 a.m, I had enough preliminary findings to be confident in my conclusions. The forgery, and it was a forgery, carefully and expensively done, had been introduced into the document at some point between 2009 and 2014, based on the oxidation rate of the iron gall ink. The law firm on King Street had filed the disputed title in 2019. That meant someone had spent 5 to 10 years setting this up. This isn't opportunistic, I told the client. Someone planned this, a long time ago. He nodded like he'd suspected as much. My grandfather died in 2018. He spent the last years of his life in a memory care facility in Barrie. He couldn't have noticed changes to documents he hadn't seen in decades. Do you know who had access to his legal files during that period? I have a list, he said. I've had a list for 8 months. What I didn't have was proof. He looked at my documentation, spread across the table. Until now. I looked at him. Really looked at him. The way I sometimes look at documents when I'm trying to understand not just what they say, but why they exist. Who are you? I asked. It was a strange question to ask someone at 6 a.m. when you'd been working alongside them for 5 hours. But I realized I still didn't know. I knew he had resources. I knew he had people who were loyal to him, the coordinator, the quiet men, the driver, and that they were loyal in a way that felt earned rather than purchased. I knew Arthur had vouched for him before he was shot. I knew he'd researched me carefully enough to know about the peanut butter. I knew he was the kind of careful that means someone has survived things they don't talk about. My family has been in construction in this country for 3 generations, he said. My grandfather came here from Calabria in 1952 with nothing, built a contracting business from the ground up. My father expanded it. I run it now. A pause. We've also, over the years, made certain that our business interests were protected in ways that didn't always involve lawyers. I am a forensic document analyst. I know what 3-generation Italian-Canadian contracting families who protect their interests outside of legal channels are, as a category of entity. I see, I said. I want to be honest with you, he said, because you've been honest with me tonight, and because I need you to trust me enough to testify. Honesty noted, I said. Complexity of situation also noted. Something crossed his face that I think was close to a smile, though it was subtle enough that I could have been wrong. Arthur said you were direct. Arthur also apparently got shot because he mentioned my name. Yes. The not-quite smile was gone. I am sorry for that. Genuinely. I packed up my equipment. I documented my chain of custody. I did everything exactly the way I always do. Exactly the way that makes my findings defensible in court. Because whatever else was happening here, the document was real, and the forgery was real, and the truth was the truth. When I finally left, at 7:30 in the morning, the coordinator walked me out. At the door, I stopped. The law firm on King Street, I said. Are they going to be a problem? She looked at me steadily. They've been a problem for about 8 months, but problems have a way of resolving. I thought about that in the Uber home. I drew a line at the black Suburban for a 7:30 a.m. trip to my apartment in Little Portugal. I thought about $40 million and forged iron gall ink and a humidity log with a 4-minute gap. I thought about a man who had survived things he didn't talk about, sitting at the far end of a long table, watching me work without making me feel watched. I took a 3-hour nap. I showered. I went back to the Oakville documents for the client, who was definitely not entangled with anything complicated. The client called at noon. Are you all right? He asked. First thing, before anything else. Nobody in a professional context had ever asked me that first. I'm fine, I said. I'll have the preliminary report to you by end of day. Ems Vance. A pause. I know this is outside what you agreed to. I know it's more than you bargained for. I want you to know you can walk away. I'll arrange for someone else to testify. Can you? No, he admitted. Not someone who found what you found the way you found it in a way that will hold up. But I can try. I thought about Arthur, in surgery at Toronto General. I thought about the 4-minute gap. I thought about the grandmother clause, carefully forged, sitting in a King Street law office, slowly bleeding $40 million out of a family whose grandfather came here with nothing and built something with his hands. I'm not walking away, I said. But I have conditions. Name them. My junior analysts get moved somewhere safe while this is active. My sister doesn't find out any specifics, but someone makes sure she's not a point of leverage. And when this is over, you arrange for Arthur's hospital bills to be covered without it looking like it came from you. A longer pause than any of the others. Done, he said. All 3. Then I'll have your report by 5. The case took 4 more months. I won't detail all of it here. Some of it is still in the courts, and some of it I've been asked not to discuss, and some of it is simply too complicated to explain to anyone who hasn't spent their career looking at paper under a loupe. What I'll say is this. The forgery held up under every form of analysis. My testimony held up under 6 days of cross-examination by a Bay Street litigator, who was very good at her job and very displeased to find herself losing. The witness signature was established as fraudulent. The reversionary clause was struck. The land and the development rights stayed in the family. Arthur was released from Toronto General in March. I visited him once he was home, a quiet house in Rosedale where he'd lived for 30 years. He was thinner and moved carefully, but his eyes were sharp. He told me what you did, Arthur said. All of it. I did my job, I said. You did considerably more than your job. He looked at me over his tea. He's not an easy man to trust. I've known him for 20 years, and it took me 10 of them to get there, I noticed. And yet, I agreed. I saw the client one more time, at the end. He came to my office, the real one, in the annex, with the brass plate and the humidity-controlled storage room. and he stood in the doorway the way people do when they're not sure they're welcome further in. "It's settled," he said. "As of this morning." "I know." The clerk called me. He nodded. He had an envelope with him, which he set on the corner of my desk. "Your fee, plus the agreed premium, and something extra for the disruption." I looked at the envelope. I didn't open it. "You didn't have to come in person." "I know." He was quiet for a moment. The Toronto February light came through my north-facing windows and made everything look a little gray and honest, the way winter light does. "I wanted to thank you properly. For not walking away when you had every reason to." I thought about what to say to that. I am not particularly good at moments like this. My sister would have said something warm and natural. I usually say something accurate instead. "The document was interesting," I said finally. "I don't get many documents that are genuinely interesting anymore." He looked at me for a long moment. Then, for the first time without any ambiguity about it, he smiled. It changed his face considerably. It turned out he had been handsome all along. "Goodbye, Ms. Vance," he said. "Goodbye," I said. He left. I listened to the freight elevator descend. And then I sat at my desk with the envelope in front of me and the north-facing February light coming through the windows. And I thought about how ordinary my office looked from the inside when you didn't know what had happened in it, and how that was true of most things, most places, most people, that the interesting parts were never visible from the outside, that you had to get close enough to look properly and know what to look for before you could see what was really there. I opened the envelope. Then I called my assistant and told her to order lunch because it was almost noon and some things, at least, stay reliably simple.